being considered one of the world's only superpower, formerly dominant on the international stage, United States' influence and legitimacy has largely been undermined by the very ideals put forth by this administration. Promises of peace being left unfulfilled, and claims of economic burgeoning led to stagnation. The very reputability of the United States and our closest allies has eroded to a shadow of its former self. So when posed with a similar situation today, the question of how should we respond to the turmoil in Syria, it is absolutely crucial that we not repeat the very mistakes that have led to such failures in the past. In fact, Syria has been the very epitome of poor foreign policy led by this administration, with The Guardian reporting July 22nd of this year that the death toll in Syria has amounted to over 19,000 people. And the fact is that while Bashar al-Assad, the leader of Syria, has the audacity to purport himself as the savior of his people and the defender of human rights, the fact of the matter is that he both permits and actually instigates the laws that deny his people the very rights that he claimed he would preserve. With the most egregious example of this would be when he turned his military against his very own people. And as we can see, this is immoral in several respects. However, Obama's stance in Libya best illustrates this, quoting, "We cannot stand idly when a tyrant tells his people that there will be no mercy, when innocent men and women face brutality and death at the hands of their own government." Similarly, we can see in Syria, when these very actions are going on, we cannot stand idly, and rather we must take a unified and multilateral stance on increasing and supplying these very troops in order to strengthen and legitimize their own movement. With the World Politics Review pointing out in April of this year, titled Syria, Obama's Bosnia, Obama actively criticized President Clinton on his delay of action in Bosnia. Obama has even made the most egregious example of this in not having action, and thus we can see that we must take action in Syria in order to create a more unified and more stable country.
It is well known that the Middle East is a dangerous region, and U.S. involvement over the past decade has been costly in both money and lives. While we are out of Iraq, we still remain in Afghanistan, and despite our war weariness and the need to switch from our nation building through overwhelming force to maintenance of our interests through precise and efficient means, it is important that we see our mission in Afghanistan through to the finish. Now, with regards to Afghanistan, I advocate that we adhere to recommendations made by not only the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but also by generals on the ground that we withdraw our troops by 2014. However, in no way does this mean that we are going to be abandoning our interests in the region. Several thousand instructors will remain to ensure a smooth transition to Afghan control. And over the last 4 years, the current administration has increased our troop presence in Afghanistan by 200%. Through this strategy, our military has secured Kabul and is continuing to decimate the Taliban and insurgents in mountainous regions. On that note, we have brought Osama bin Laden to justice, and we must continue to focus on combating terrorism rather than adhering to an outdated foreign policy. Looking to Libya, where the United States played an integral role in securing liberty during the Arab Spring, it is clear to see that the United States took a front seat role in leading a UN no-fly zone and ensuring liberty and peace across the region. Indeed, in our presence in Libya, the United States strengthened its alliance with NATO countries. After falling out after the Iraqi war, it's clear that the United States needed to make sure that our alliances with not only NATO countries, but also international countries, was going to be successful in ensuring long-term peace. In our policy in NATO, the United States led UN Resolution 1973 to provide air support but not ground support in Libya. In doing this, we secured our international interests and maintained the fact that the United States can not only act unilaterally but must have diplomatic relations with other countries.
As my opponent quite succinctly pointed out in his last speech, the United States took a very front seat role in action in Libya. Similarly, we can see that what is going on in Syria is irreprehensible. We cannot allow this to happen. And what you realize from his speech and from the very advocacy that he's pointing out from the very Democratic Party is that we are having inaction in the country of Syria. This is wrong on several levels. Firstly, we're seeing death amount at unprecedented rates. Second of all, with the United States standing up for universal human rights, preserving the rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, We must take an active stance on minimizing these deaths, these very human rights abuses that are going on in the country of Syria. And thus we can see that the United States must take action. His very own advocacy is not fulfilling his role of trying to minimize these deaths on the international stage. We can see that with the Republican stance, the very advocacy that I'm pointing out, we're saving these lives, and ultimately we're creating a more stable region, because ultimately he stated we want to bring peace to the Middle East, and we can only do that in bringing peace to countries like Syria, and we can do that with my advocacy.
My opponent mentioned a lot about Syria and how the United States, my opponent conceded that in Libya, the United States took a front seat role in ensuring the liberty and security of the Libyan people, and by supporting the rebels through the UN resolution. However, my opponent then went on to state that the United States must value its diplomacy and can do that in Syria. However, the United States, along with the international community, is unable to act through diplomacy in order to secure Syrian security. In fact, there is no alliance among NATO nations or among other international partners in order to have a successful military intervention in Syria. And so it's clear to see that there's agreement not only among Democrats and Republicans that this would be not a viable option. In fact, Stephen Hadley, National Security Advisor to President George W. Bush, claimed that in Syria there is no viable military option in order to actually secure Syrian liberty. But the United States, in acting in Libya and in Afghanistan, was able to secure our interests in the long term by using diplomacy, and this simply doesn't exist in Syria.